Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Can you hear me all right? All right. I'm Andrew Shapiro, founder of Broadscale Group. Really delighted to be here with all my fellow panelists on our panel on innovating for the clean economy. I've been working for almost 2 decades on energy and environmental innovation, working with big corporates, with startups, trying to accelerate innovation. And I have to tell you, I think this is about the most exciting time that we've had over the last 2 decades. Because we would assemble here every year for Climate Week and talk aspirationally about if we could only get to an international agreement. And now we are there. The Paris Agreement last year was truly transformational, a critical step toward mitigating climate change. But the challenge remains. We've got the foundation, we've got an agreement, we've got a framework, but now we actually need to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to dig in and really figure out what is it going to take when it comes to public policy and regulation. Some of it will happen on the state level. We were talking earlier about the balance between top-down and bottom-up. We're going to talk a lot about technology. We have technology leaders here as well. And we're going to talk about capital, because as Andrew just told us, that is a critical part of the equation of working toward a low-carbon economy. I want to start, though, with Susan Aplin, the CEO of Bambeco. Susan is a consumer products retail person by background. She's worked at a lot of the biggest brands in retail. But she started her own firm, Bambeco, a number of years ago, and is here to tell us what the consumer perspective is, because I think that's really critically important, right? We can't leave out the everyday viewpoint on climate change. Polls in the United States show support for action on climate change is strong. At least 2/3 of respondents say they want the government to take action. On the other hand, climate change is a divisive issue. We're living in a time of divisive politics. Studies I just saw are actually saying that climate change is more polarizing as an issue in the United States than either abortion or gay marriage. So Susan, where are we? What is the consumer perspective all on this, and how do we leverage that to move things forward in a positive way?
That's a great question. So the winds are definitely shifting in policy and government and in various sectors, but we'd be remiss if we didn't focus on the customer, because these markets have to exist and they have to be strong. Look, when I was thinking about starting a sustainable home goods company in 2009, the US population said 59%, if style, price, and quality were equal, I would want sustainable home goods in my home. Today, it's 91%. 91% of global consumers say retailers have a responsibility not only to be profitable, but to address social and environmental issues. And 84% of all consumers today say that they want sustainable goods in their home. So we've definitely seen a consumer shift. The market is shifting. It's hard for retailers to address this, though. You've got entrenched supply chains. These relationships have been in place for decades. For a company like Bambeco, it was a little easier. We started the company through the lens of sustainability to address all of the consumer concerns across the supply chain, from packaging to who we hire to where we locate our factories. We look for places around the world today to address consumer concerns that would allow us to reduce carbon emissions at the factory level. But really, I heard earlier today in a wonderful breakfast that Apple, Lisa Jackson was saying the last piece, the hardest piece of their focus was the last mile. Where we unlocked our commitment was in the first mile, really getting to the raw materials and really figuring out that piece, where they come from. So today, 51% of all of our products are made from raw materials diverted from landfills. And the rest are made from renewal and organic materials. There is a way to unlock this market for the consumer market to address that demand. By 2020, Bambeco will be carbon neutral, the first home goods carbon neutral company in the US. I think retailers have to move in this direction to address that consumer market.
And are consumers willing to sort of back up that support by paying a premium for products, do you see?
When we launched Bambeco, we did it through the philosophy that you shouldn't have to pay more. that products should be on an equal playing field. So we comp shopped all the big guys to make sure that we kept products in line. But we know today that you can put a premium on products. We just don't do it.
Okay. Premier Couillard from Quebec, nice to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about regulatory mechanisms. There are now a number of regional cap and trade systems, and I know that Quebec is now working with California and is working with cap and trade to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Can you tell us a little bit about why that's the mechanism you're using? And then I want to follow up by talking about some of the technologies that you guys are promoting specifically.
First, a little bit of background in Quebec that may not be familiar to all of the audience this morning. We are fortunate enough to hold 3% of the world's freshwater reserves, which drove us naturally to the choice of hydroelectricity along the years, so that 98% of our electricity is made out of renewable sources now because of this very, very favorable geographic reality. So
we're jealous about that.
I know, but we have nothing to do with this. This is where Champlain decided to land, and this is the way it happened. But it sounds easy, but there was a tough battle in the 70s about going nuclear or hydro. And fortunately, hydro prevailed. Then let's move forward, and we get to this issue of carbon pricing that you just mentioned. The first thing I'd like to say is that I always feel that this debate doesn't start the right way. Before asking ourselves what kind of fiscal tool we're going to use, we should first remember that all of these tools are there for one thing, is to drop emissions and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If we get entangled in fiscal debates while losing sight of the primary objective of what we do, then it's not a very productive discussion. It leads to even more polarized public opinion. So once we decided to put a price on carbon, we started with the very traditional levy on fossil fuels. Then we joined WCI, the Western Climate Initiative. This is what put us in touch with California, and then led us to start a carbon trading system with California a few years ago. That started joint auction in 2014, so it's rather recent. Then Ontario is joining now. We've signed an MOU also with Mexico. And we've just heard in the recent days that China is going to have a countrywide carbon trading system, which means that more than half of the world GDP is going to be under some kind of carbon trading mechanism. So I think we've reached there the point of no return. Now, there's always a debate about carbon tax or carbon trading. I would say both are good methods, but maybe a few observations need to be made. First, that in the current low fossil fuel prices, carbon tax, in my opinion, loses a lot of its power. And the problem with a carbon tax is that once you've set it up, you need to increase it on a regular basis. And I can tell you by experience that politicians are rather allergic to the idea of increasing taxes along the way. Whereas a carbon market has an internal mechanism that adjusts the floor price in correspondence with the drop in emissions. Second, I don't feel that the carbon tax offers you any guarantee that emissions will drop. And what I like in the cap and trade is the word cap. This is what gives you an objective in terms of reducing the emissions. And then finally, we get benefits out of this market. Proceeds of the market are totally invested in a green fund that is used to put our climate change action plan in action, which includes measures of adaptation mitigation as well, and also scientific research. So this is the complete setup that led us to where we are today. But at the government level, you have to be very careful to make sure that you follow two fundamental principles, particularly for the business community. The first is predictability. It's absolutely essential, we heard it earlier, that business leaders know exactly what the playing field will be this year, 5 years from now, and further. With the carbon trading system, we can actually map along the years, how much the ton is going to cost on the market, so business leaders can make the appropriate decisions. The other factor is coherence between various policies of government. So I like to see it as a triangle in Quebec, where we have our climate change action plan. We have our energy policy that has been recently published. I invite everyone to have a look at it. It's available on the web. And the economic development plan that I have to always work in sync. So this gives an environment which is coherent and predictable, and normally could lead us to lower emissions even, although we have now the lowest emission level in Canada by far, close to 10 tons per person per year, which is roughly the European level. But the flip side of this is that the low-hanging fruits have been harvested already. Now we're faced with a tough.
Well, I was going to say, since you have so much hydro, and you have a very low-carbon electricity system. I understand one of the areas you're focusing on is transportation.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
vehicle electrification. If I hear correctly, there's an electric bus here.
Yes, a small company they're going to showcase called Lion, like lions, you know, in Africa. Lion buses, commercializing electric school buses.
Okay.
In Canada and in the States now, and more. And it works in winter conditions. It's a great little company. We have also larger companies offering electric buses. But you're right, you're pinpointing exactly where the next theme will be. Transportation represents 45% of our emissions, as is the case in many jurisdictions in this room. Therefore, this question of electrification is of capital importance. We've set up a very ambitious goal of 100,000 electric cars or plug-in hybrids on our roads in 2020, which is very ambitious. We've asked the investors to look at a very important plan for an electric train in Montreal, which would be the third largest in the world, $5.5 billion project, which is entirely electric. And we put a variety of incentives for individuals and businesses to make the transition, for example, between diesel fuel and LNG, then eventually solar or wind or small hydro when it's possible. So all this has to work together. The last thing I will mention is that our energy policy also creates an arm's length independent body that will look at energy transition, making sure that what is funded is not some governmental pet project, but really something that is good, has defined objectives, and can be measured as we go.
And are you hopeful that regardless of the outcome of our US presidential election, you will continue to have the right partners here?
I hope so. This is clearly a very polarizing debate. We are at the age of the extremes. This is what I like to say regularly at home. Moderate, balanced position are not in the mood these days. So when I listen to the debate, I still hear people wanting to reopen coal generation facilities in the States, which seems to be going in the opposite direction of what should be done. On the other hand, there's immense appetite in northeastern US for Quebec hydro, which for us economically, of course, is very favorable and would answer a lot of New England and northeastern US, including the New York State and the city of New York, a lot of their issues regarding transition.
Thank you. Eric Rondolat, CEO of Philips Lighting. Let's talk about the whole landscape of what's happening in LEDs and lighting, because there's really dramatic potential impacts in terms of reducing energy consumption and reducing cost. The other thing that's happening is the connection with the Internet of Things and the ability to really leverage the progress that's made with sensors and computing power and big data to have this be done in a way that could have dramatic impacts. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the lighting industry is extremely interesting when it comes to the subject of this panel, which is innovating for a clean or for a cleaner economy. Let me give you a few numbers. 60 billion will be the number of light points on the planet by 2030. So that industry is growing. This is 35% more than today. Not everybody here knows it, but 15% of the worldwide electrical consumption goes to lighting. And then when you talk about innovation, we know with the existing developed technologies today, we can save up to 80% of that consumption. So we're talking about LED, we're talking about connected lighting and the use of apps in the Internet of Things. So these are quite staggering statistics and numbers. So should we be happy with it? I'm not too sure, because at the end of the day, the NASA has just told us that July 2016 was reported as the hottest month in the recorded history. I don't think that we're exactly sure, after the Paris Agreement, how we're going to achieve the 1.5 degrees in global warming. I don't know if even we know how to achieve the 2%. So, I'm participating a lot to these types of conferences on climate change, and I always try to take a very specific moment to try to outline some very specific measures that we believe could be taken between companies, between governments, and all different stakeholders. And I would go in three directions, if you allow me. So the first one is to look at, what we give to ourselves as an ambition. 1.5% is the improvement of energy efficiency that we have set to the world as a target. When we know that energy usage is increasing by 3% on a yearly basis, that is not sufficient. So maybe in COP22, maybe in Morocco, in Marrakesh, we can try to look at this and maybe give to ourselves a target which is at the level of the challenge that we have in front of us. The second element, and the second thing that I want to say is companies, actors need to be responsible. So we talked this morning about should we increase the stick and the carrot? Maybe. But we need to make sure that companies like ours are responsible. We're launching in New York a new sustainability program that we call Brighter Lives, Better World, where we take the following commitments. We're going to sell by 2020 2 billion LED lamps. 80% of our revenue are going to be sustainable. 100% of our energy will be consumed from renewable sources, and we believe that we're going to be one of the very happy few companies to be fully carbon neutral. Third direction, very clear measures can be taken at different levels. I believe that from 2020 on, we should not be building any more infrastructures and buildings that are not sustainable. By 2025, we should have all our streets LED lit. Mm-hmm. And by 2030, I believe that all the buildings that we live in should be also made of LED lighting, because this is a business that we know fairly well. And now you're going to tell me, are the finances existing, or is it going to be an issue to make all that happen? We believe that if we do this, it will have positive impacts on many different points. We can create 6 million jobs. We can save until 2030 2.3 trillion, reducing fuel costs, and we can also have the energy bills of households. So as you can see, it's not only painful, it brings also a lot of collateral benefits.
Very good. And one of the interesting things is the growing interconnectedness between lighting and telecommunications and computing. We had a company that we had selected to present to our corporate network, which just announced that it's going to be acquired by Verizon. Sensity. So you've got players in the cable and telco market that are getting into lighting and IoT. It really raises the opportunity for all of the technology companies in the world to be working on climate change, even if energy is not their core focus. Does that mean that you as a company are going to be finding new competitors in the market? How will that play out?
Or alliances.
Or alliances.
Yeah. We work today a lot with and telecom providers, because we have been developing, a unique light pole. What you have in a city everywhere are light poles. And so within that light pole, we integrate, all the mobile telephony electronics, which is enabling, the providers, telecom providers, to make sure that they can have, their antenna in all the different spots, in the city. They don't need to hire or they don't need to buy spaces. They just can house that in a light pole. And that allows to avoid blind spots, for instance, while at the same time, this light pole is energy efficient because it's made of LED lighting, and it brings also 70% saving for the municipality. So everybody wins.
Great. Nancy, let's talk solar. You just put out this interesting report. Here's a good visual aid about what the next president of the United States needs to know about clean energy. And you got some great facts and statistics, so go to the DBL Investors website and download it.
Thank you.
But specifically, you talk about if you took the level of solar penetration today in California and could get other big states in the US to do the same, you would overnight be able to double the amount of solar we have and make real progress towards the United States goals when it comes to reducing climate impacts and greenhouse gas emissions. So what are the barriers to having that actually occur? Are they policy-driven, technology, or capital? I mean, what's the biggest barrier to getting that to happen?
Good question. I mean, it's really all of the above, isn't it? And that's really what's informed our investment approach over the past 12 or 13 years. The report really, of course, we want to price carbon. We want some kind of a tax or cap and trade. But this gets, it's very wonkish, and it gets into things we can do now, today, to, for example, extend the investment tax credit to storage, or direct programs, as Ernie was saying, to low-income communities or to coal states. I mean, it's really about that. And what that statistic that you just mentioned, Andrew, it's super instructive because as we've heard from Susan, the consumer wants all of this. We just need to present it in a package and not, trip ourselves in the process of delivering these goods and services. And California has been at it a while, and of course, I'm not here to be one of those insufferable Californians that talk about how great it is. But there are some lessons we can learn, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We certainly have enough issues, challenges we need to confront there. But way back in the 80s, the efficiency standards for appliances that California led with, my own experience with the California Air Resources Board, the electric vehicle credits that were fundamental to the beginnings of the electrification of transportation, the ability of Tesla in its early days to really derive some revenues from the ZEV credits was essential. And then in the solar field, the Million Solar Roofs program that Arnold Schwarzenegger, our governor at the time, the net metering, these are the building blocks of policies that have allowed California to have, 10 gigawatts of solar when other states are much less penetrated. And so the way to fix that, in our mind, is what we've done over the years is really, it's a trifecta. It's getting the technology right, the investment right, and the policy right, and really interstitiating between, among those three factors is how you make money in this business, which then attracts more capital and attracts more entrepreneurs to do good things. I'm just going to give one example of how all this works because it's really about our future. And as an impact investor, investing for both social and financial return, this story has a really important dimension to it, which is we want to improve the diversity of our environmental entrepreneurs. We want the climate industry to look like America. We want it ethnically diverse and gender diverse. And so this is a good story to show you how that can happen. In terms of stationary storage, we've all heard about that, microgrids, the ability to pull your power from whatever pricing signals tell you is cheapest, or wherever, if the grid is under stress, take it from your batteries or take it from your solar on top of your roof. This is all happening now, and it's fantastic. It will transform the way we use and generate our electricity. So how did that happen in California? And California, again, has lots of megawatts under contract to do just this. Back in 2010, a member of the state assembly, Nancy Skinner, a woman, developed a bill that was passed that really just called on the regulators to encourage the development of storage. This is when we saw that solar was really taking off and that we'd need storage to really maximize and optimize the use of renewables in the grid. And some of you may be wondering, you let a member of the California Assembly decide your storage policy? Well, she's experienced. She does her homework. She was a student of Art Rosenfeld, really the father of energy efficiency, many times kind of awarded all the medals you could get. So she's a great public servant, and she accomplished this. Then a couple years later, at the CPUC, the Public Utilities Commission, Carla Peterman implemented that bill and created a 1,300 megawatt storage mandate for our state's utilities to go after. African American, PhD, Rhodes Scholar. She's just an amazingly intelligent and effective commissioner. She'd be here today, but she just had her first child last week. So she got that done. And then what happened is the former chief of staff for Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was governor doing all these wonderful things in climate, Susan Kennedy was looking at all of this, and there's no one that knows kind of the utility the regulatory approaches better than Susan, having lived through many administrations doing this. So in California, what do you do when you see all of these changes happening and you're not working for the governor anymore? Well, of course, you become an entrepreneur. So she decided to start her own company called Advanced Microgrid Solutions. And right off the bat, even before she raised her Series A, and this doesn't happen in our world very much, she got a contract from SoCal Edison, huge utility in the LA area, for 50 megawatts of stationary storage, microgrid storage. And then it took me, the sort of fourth woman in the story, about 2 seconds to say, yeah, we got to invest in this company. She knows what she's doing. She can really help utilities. Everyone talks about the utility, the death spiral, what happened in Nevada. That isn't the reality. The reality is that utilities are working with the new entrants, with regulators, and we're going to make this happen. It's not as, headline worthy, I guess, to tell that story as it is to tell about all the conflicts. But we are infusing, and Susan and other entrepreneurs, Solar City, Tesla, SunPower, we're all getting, we're learning how to work together towards our clean energy future. And I think that is the message, that we've got the playbook. It's not that complicated. We've got the data, and I'll commend you to this report that can show you we can do this. We've got the playbook, and we just need to start scoring.
Great. Andrew Plepler, could you just give us, what's the backstory of this remarkable announcement you guys just made? Why is B of A doing it? What's the motivator? Is it employee-driven, shareholder-driven, all the above, customer-driven?
I would say all the above. Susan, the first thing she said was the customer demand, and Nancy spoke about this as well from investor demand. I sat in a meeting last Thursday and Friday. I was in shareholder meetings, which the ESG person at the bank did not historically sit in shareholder meetings talking about our ESG work. So what we're seeing now is interest being driven in sustainability, responsible business practices, how you treat your own workforce, all of these issues that really define a sustainable company are being followed by investors, certainly by employees. I mean, employees weren't real happy working at a financial institution over the last 5-6 years, and our employee SAT numbers reflected that. And so these issues of your values and your commitment to larger issues in society than yourself have really taken hold among employees. And if you want to attract and retain the best people, you better be serious about this. Investors want you to be serious about it. High net worth individuals who we work with in our wealth management group are demanding impact investing products that drive sustainability. So I would say all of these stakeholders have made this very much enlightened self-interest for us. And Brian Moynihan's mantra right now is responsible growth, and he says at every internal and external meeting he goes to, we've got to grow. We've got to grow with the customer at the center of everything we do, within our risk appetite, and it's got to be sustainable. And that is embedded in the larger corporate strategy, and that bodes very well for commitments like $125 billion in renewable, carbon neutrality, 100% renewable. If you can get the business strategy of the company aligned with these activities, they're going to only grow and only be more impactful over time.
And can I just add on there? It's so important, the new entrants working with the banks and the finance players, as well as with the incumbents. And I don't know what the industry statistic is, but at Solar City, I know that we've put together financing funds with a variety of banks to the tune of over $9 billion. A lot of people don't realize that we're spending some serious money here.
Yeah. I know we're going to be going to a break soon. Do we have time? Let me just see. I think I'm going to ask one other question for any of the panelists here. One of the dynamics that has been at work for a number of years in this sector is volatility, right? So how do we get more stability or more certainty for the investors, for the consumers you're trying to reach, for the government partners you're looking to work with, that we're headed the right direction? Will Paris be the breakthrough that will give confidence to all these players for you to have LEDs be proliferating everywhere? What is that kind of magic X factor we're looking for so that people don't say, oh, I'd like to be moving things the right direction, but these things seem to go in dips and valleys?
And
Anybody?
maybe I could say just briefly that the role of government here is not to do things for the private sector. It's to provide them with the right environment and the predictability in the environment that makes them take the right decisions. Coming back to what I said earlier, having an economic strategy, an energy policy, and a climate change action plan all linked together gives a very intelligible field for any potential investor, any business that wants to set up shop in Quebec. Just a quick word on renewables. When we present hydroelectricity as a source of export to the US or import, regarding how you look at it, we don't see it as displacing or replacing other renewables, just adding, I would say, a reliable base load to the portfolio. That's important to say. We're not there to compete against solar or wind. Actually, we do have some wind capacity ourselves in Quebec.
Great. Anybody else? Susan?
I think there's not a silver bullet. I think it's policymakers. I think it's consumer demand. I think it's this groundswell. It's an economic market that allows this to be viable. And the way I look at it, it really is about people, planet, and profit. And if those three things don't come together, it doesn't work.
And the science helps.
Yeah,
you
the
know,
science.
The reality,
Science, what a radical concept.
not everywhere, but the consensus helps build predictability and build stability in the marketplace. And I think as people come to realize that we are, in fact, going to need to transition to a low-carbon economy, that predictability is there.
I would say the industry structure, I mean, Paris was just such an amazing shot in the arm and giving us our marching orders. And technology, innovation, all of that is so fundamentally important. Industry structure, getting utilities and new entrants to work together, getting utilities to have more of a competitive angle to what they do is essential. I mean, if we hadn't brought telecom, a couple of decades ago, out of sort of its monopolistic past into a more competitive environment, all you people taking pictures with your iPhones or tweeting on your phones, you wouldn't be doing that. You need competition. You need the kind of virtues of capitalism to bring out the innovation that is inherently in this field in significant ways.
And I think I also hear, if there's one watchword that I would take away from this panel, and we think about this at Broadscale, if you want to turn innovation into impact, perhaps the key to it is collaboration, right? So with that, please join me in thanking this terrific panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.